Julia is in Cesena. It was once dubbed the Manhattan of Madrid. But Julia, just looking behind you, looks pretty empty right now. The only thing we need there is a bit of tumbleweed. Can you get the producer to sort that out?
Actually, there's plenty of it. I don't need to ask any producers to do that. It is a wasteland. It's apartment blocks in the middle of nowhere, and there's actually huge craters where obviously foundations for other apartment blocks and buildings were supposed to be built, and they've just been abandoned. As you said, it's a legacy to the housing boom that really peaked in 2007. Now, fast forward 5 years, and analysts say that house prices have adjusted downwards by 20 to 25%, and that probably we need to see about the same again. Commerzbank actually say 25% further that they need to fall if you compare it to what's happened in the US and the level of adjustment that's taken place there. Now, it's interesting because Santander apparently sold 500 to 600 apartments here in the building that you can see on my right in the last few months, and apparently they sold them at below construction costs. Now, I managed to find an owner this morning, and she said that apparently she paid a third of the price that apartments in the blocks on my left here were selling for around 3 years ago. So at least in certain areas surrounding Madrid, we're seeing price drops of around 60 to 70%. Now, of course, this adjustment depends on just how willing the banks are to take provisions or to increase the write-downs that they made. We know that the government's asked them to increase provisions by around 80 billion euros, and it does seem to be feeding into this. Now, she said that she put down a 50% deposit, but the facts suggest that although the volumes are incredibly low compared to what we saw at the peak, in fact 50% of the houses purchases that are going on right now are done by cash. Now, I spoke to a mortgage broker earlier this morning, and this is what he had to say about that fact.
The banks are really tough in terms of credit criteria to get new mortgages, unless obviously they are their own properties. And the other one is that it seems like some investors are looking at the properties as a safe way. You know, they think that the prices are going down good enough. And the other one is that the uncertainty about getting out of the euro or not. Some people are saying I'd better have my cash in properties rather than in the bank.
Now, he expects the banks to accelerate their losses this year, and actually that we could see house prices fall by around 12% this year. But then you have to remember there's a backlog of up to 1.5 million homes that still has to clear, and he said it could take 3 to 5 years to reach that point.
Cesena is once dubbed the Manhattan of Madrid, but now it's a relative ghost town, as we can see from the pictures behind you, Julia. How much is this symbolic of the problem of the country, where a huge property crash weighing down the banks and ultimately weighing down the sovereign?
It's at the heart of the sovereign debt crisis here in Spain, Ross. It's absolutely the issue. And actually, we've been travelling around Spain this last week, and what I've seen here today is not unusual. You see buildings being built 45 minutes to an hour away from a city, and then just wasteland between here and now. If you don't have a car here, you're in serious trouble. If you mistime the buses, it takes 3 hours to get to the centre of Madrid. So it's small wonder that the occupancy rate of this building on my right is around 5%. So brokers and mortgage brokers here tell me, of course, the valuation is a problem too, and that's going to be a problem until we see the write-downs from the banks. They've been forced to make provisions against this to the sum of around 80 billion euros this year. And actually what I've heard in the last few days is that Santander has managed to sell between 500 and 600 apartments in this block, though they reportedly sold them for less than the construction price. And actually I spoke to one owner who told me that she bought her property for less than a third that apartments were selling for just 3 years ago. So while analysts are suggesting that house prices have fallen 25%, what we're seeing here at least is house prices that have fallen more like 60%. But you know, among the people I've been discussing it with, house prices are actually not the big issue in terms of valuation for the banks. The more critical issue is not just the commercial real estate, but also land prices. And if we look at the Oliver Wyman report, they were suggesting losses on land of around 72%. So that's one critical issue. The other thing is 90% of the mortgages here are variable rate. And actually, although the sums are very small, 95% of those that are currently being originated are still variable rate. So we move forward 3 or 4 years, perhaps we see some kind of recovery in the Eurozone, rates start to rise, and we could have a second issue here in the Spanish mortgage market. So it's difficult to see the bright side right now. For now, though, guys, it's back to you.
Jules, very quickly, are those variable rates pegged to what the ECB lending rates are, or are they the cost of money to Spanish banks, which presumably are an awful lot different?
Euribor. That's what I've been told by the mortgage brokers here, but I can double check that, but it does look like Euribor. But I mean, the prices that I've been looking at are significantly higher than elsewhere that you'd see in Europe. Credit here is incredibly restricted.